Howdy, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the MatchNet podcast. We are privileged to have these two fine folks with us. The Holdhus couple, Sungmi and Kris. How you guys doing today?
Doing all right.
Good, thank you. Yeah.
Fantastic. I just want to give a massive shout out, first of all, to all of our European listeners. I know you guys are out there. I know you are out there, right? Every time I go to Champyong or to workshops, or I was in Europe for quite a few different countries and workshops this year, and I know you guys listen. So please let us know how we're doing, and I hope you know that we appreciate all of our listeners over there in Europe. But today, I would really want to highlight these fine individuals and highlight their matching process and how they found each other, and the process through which they had to go through internally to find each other and to feel blessed themselves. So I'm going to give you the floor, Sungmi, to share away how you guys met and where you came from.
All right. So how we met was pretty straightforward in like a technical sense. A couple of friends recommended Kris to me over about a year period, on and off. And for various reasons, which I'll get into later, I wasn't open to it at first. And then coming off the back of a very disappointing matching process where I went all the way to Europe to meet the guy, it didn't work out. I was kind of fed up, is I think a good way of putting it, and just ready. I'm like, God, this is my time. Like, I'm going to meet the guy. And then a friend brought up his name again, and she's like, why don't you just reach out? And so I reached out through his pastor, who is a Donia Hentrick, co-pastor of the Denver church. And it was pretty straightforward. She gave me a little lowdown on what he was looking for. I was like, I'm this age, I'm looking for this. You think he's interested? It was very direct, which I think was good. And he sent back like a very lovely message that gave me some hope, like, okay, maybe this could be good. So yeah, she connected us within a few days. He was dying of COVID at the time. So it was all text at first. But then, yeah, it progressed pretty quickly. Yeah. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, that's right.
COVID means he was sick. What does that mean?
He had mild pneumonia, which I didn't know at the time.
It's probably the worst I've ever been sick in my life.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, maybe. Definitely up there. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It was sort of Adonia texted me and said, "Hey, because Adonia, she's the pastor in Denver. She knows I was looking. She knew I was looking, and so she texted me, and it was just, hey, someone reached out about you. They're looking for faith, family, and community. Do you want me to connect you?" And that was about it. I responded, I don't mind connecting myself, and so I did. But I mean, the one thing I'd add really to this, just for the listeners out there, is we're starting off with how we met. And it sounds really easy, like, oh, she just reached out and then we were connected. But there was a lot of hard work that went into just kind of years of essentially a journey to getting there, right? Talking to other people, other processes, a lot of internal debate. Yeah.
Yeah, like even reaching out as the woman, reaching out to the guy, I've heard that so many times with sisters, like, but what if he says no? And I'm, all of these things. Or shouldn't the guy even my dad had this own concept, and we laugh about it now. Since I'm the one who reached out to him, he would have never known I existed. We weren't in the same social circles at all. I mean, now we kind of realized all the connections, but he's 7 years older than me. So his friends, like I have friends who are their younger siblings, things like that. So yeah, it was piggybacking, off of many years of overcoming concepts. And that was one small one that I didn't mind too much. I'd reached out to guys before.
You mean that he was older than you?
Well, but also that the girl reaches out. I mean, it's kind of dumb when you think about it. It's like, why does it matter in the end? Like how you got started, it's how it ends, how you land together. But yeah, him being older, he also has kids. He has 3 kids from a previous marriage.
Yeah.
That was initially the reason why I said no to the idea of him. I knew nothing about him. It was just like, nope, don't want to deal with that. Sounds complicated. That's all. Like to me personally, I thought that was complicated. And then going on a journey of meeting, guys who still wanted the blessing, who had children, um, through actually the 24 plus connect retreats, virtual retreat. There were two dads and they were so straightforward. They were like, this is what I'm looking for, that's it. They were uncomplicated and very clear, but I still wasn't quite ready, I think, for that leap. But yeah, we can get more into that.
Yeah. I'd add about the girl reaching out. You know, I have nothing against the girl reaching out. I know some girls like the guy to reach out, but to be honest, in our situation, I didn't know who she was. If she hadn't reached out, we never would have gotten together. And so I understand it. But
Yeah.
I think girls should just reach out when they need to.
He was very responsive in return though. So I will say that, like, that was a huge
Yeah.
draw that he was made the time. He was a busy guy, three kids, they were visiting even at the time, and he still managed to find time to respond. And I'd been in many matching conversations of varying, degrees of seriousness, where it was like 3 months and the guy couldn't even manage to message one time in the week. So anyway, yeah, motivation. Mm.
Yeah, you both alluded to challenges overcoming to get here where you are now. Can we go more into those on both of your ends?
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
wanna do you
I
wanna
can
start
start
us
this
out?
one off. Yeah. Um, well, I mean, there are a lot of challenges. Really, I mean, there's so many things you got to figure out and overcome before I would say you can get to a place where you're ready just to accept another person. I mean, there's a lot that could be said about that, but most people in this world aren't perfect, and you need to find someone that you can get along with. Um,
Hmm.
let's start with this one then. So, maybe some of the listeners out there are going to be coming out of a previous marriage, and that was certainly me. Uh, and uh, Coming out of divorce, it was massively traumatic. And yeah, um, my wife essentially left, chose a different life. Just left the picture, and then that left me kind of trying to figure out what that meant for me. And a big part of that was deciding when to let go, I suppose you could say. Um, and I put this as a challenge, um, because it, I know people in the church that never kind of gave up on their spouse that left them. Um, they just wait forever, or they decide not to get remarried. And But then I also know other people that kind of moved on right away. But I think in our church there is this kind of, there is this idea that the blessing is forever, right? And getting re-blessed means you're essentially, I don't know how else to put it, but then to say like you're abandoning that, right? If you want to get re-blessed, and that's really tough. You're abandoning that notion. Um, and so I found myself waiting and waiting, and eventually it became, you know, waiting. But then there's also this little element of, well, I'm pretty comfortable now. I got comfortable in my single life. And there's probably people out there that can identify with that. I mean, it is pretty comfortable being single, or at least you get in a routine and you get comfortable. And it became a combination of that. And so I think a lot of the initial challenge for me was deciding when I was ready um, to move on myself, when I had like what was how long was waiting for my ex to change her, have a change of heart or change of mind? How much waiting was long enough waiting, right? That I wouldn't in the future be like, oh man, if only I waited another year, or if only I waited another 5 years, or you know. Um, and Anyway, what did it take to move on from that? I think eventually I just had to be real. Um, and you know, I had made kind of just fairly consistent attempts to sort of reconcile, um, or to extend an olive branch, I suppose you could say. And every time, like I just found that she was just angry at any effort I made, and it just kind of cemented her conviction to for the divorce. I mean, we were already divorced at that point, but it just cemented her conviction, like, not like just move on, like stop harassing me. Not harassing, but stop reaching out, stop trying to make it work. Yeah, I think that it was a hard decision to make, just letting go. And actually, kind of, I think the way I was able to reconcile it for myself was that, you know, after long and hard think about it, you know, and sort of asking myself, well, why is this difficult? Why is this painful? Right. I realized that when you decide to move on, you're closing a lot of doors, right? So you're not only closing doors, I mean, you are sort of closing doors for yourself, you're closing doors in that previous blessing, but you're also closing the door of, say, for example, your kids having a future potential of their parents coming back together, you know, and in some sense, I've heard that kids never fully let go of that ideal or of that dream that their parents will one day come back together, and you're closing that door when you move on. Um, and you're closing the door for like family to extended family to to have your family become an intact family unit again, as part of that extended family, clan, whatever you're going to call it, right? Like, it's always nicer when your relatives are together and not on fighting terms, right? And so thought long and hard about that, and ultimately I ended up reaching out to my kids, and essentially asking for, the way I put it was, I asked for their blessing to move on. Um, and I didn't ask my youngest because he was too young. I got to my second and I realized, yeah, actually, this is a tough thing to ask of kids. But ultimately, my daughter Lily and my son Noah, they were. I wonder if they remember that discussion. Actually, it's a while ago. But they were pretty happy to give me that blessing to move on. I think they understood it was necessary. I think they were happy that we had that talk. I also reached out to my parents-in-law. That felt important to me because I think it's really painful for parents when things like this happen to their kids. So I reached out to them too. I asked for their blessing to move on. And just to be clear, it's not necessarily that I was asking for their permission, right? I was just giving them the opportunity to reconcile that future for themselves too, right? Um, and have us move forward together. All right, there we go. That was a significant uh, challenge I had to overcome.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Can I interject a question here?
Yeah,
Kind of to Sungmi, but in relation to your experience, I think that there's a very important mental process that you had to go through, right, Sungmi,
Mm.
when he brought this challenge up, right? And I think it's really relevant. And if people are wise when they're listening to this story, they can extrapolate this into their lives, even though the details are specific to your story. But it's very much something that everyone has to go through to some extent, is accepting someone, right? So I'm kind of curious as to what your process was to accept that reality, right?
Um, yeah, so I'd never been confronted, I guess, with the idea of second gen who'd been divorced, had kids. I mean, it's not that I didn't know people, but for me personally, right, as like talking to a candidate in that situation, I wouldn't say that they're on the websites. I don't think for the most part they go that route. I think it's more word of mouth, recommendations like that. Um, because it's not just you. You have a family of extended, like he was saying, all these people kind of involved already. Um, Yeah, so when I first reached out to him, actually, he was already talking to somebody else. And before I reached out, I did talk. So at that time, my parents and I were talking every weekend, once a week to connect specifically about the matching. Like I put all other topics off the table for that talk with them and to stay focused. And I asked them, hey, there's this guy that's been recommended to me. He's got 3 children. I'm scared of that. But what do you think? Do you think that and I made it very clear this was a we decision, because I knew I would need family support if this did move forward or if this became something more. And my mom's answer, without even skipping a beat, was his kids are our kids. That was her response.
Mhm.
And my dad echoed that. He's like, no doubt, like we would accept them and it wouldn't be an issue. They'd be our family. And that blew me away. Like that gave me so much confidence. And I remember like just bursting into tears, like, like, are you sure I can handle this though? Like you guys seem really confident. And they're like, no, you love children. You want kids, like that's a blessing. You already have 3 kids in your life. It's yeah, we'll figure it out together.
Yeah. And then that's not insignificant. I mean, it is challenging to take on someone else's kid.
I've had a couple of summers, intense time together, intense blended family building. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's more complex than you can know until you're in it. But that's with any situation, with any, I think, relationship. You don't know 100% what you're taking on. Someone once said to me, you accept the concept of a person, and then you have to actually learn to love the person, right, in a relationship. So yeah, you have this concept. And I mean, Kris, to his credit, he was like, nah, no issue, they'll love you. It's just like he had no what is it, he was very confident about it, and so that
Yeah.
helped me have confidence. Like, are you sure? Like I'm overthinking this, right? um so that was one, like just accepting the idea, right, of being a stepmother, what that means. I hate that word, by the way. I really dislike the step, and anyway, that's a whole other podcast for you're not really a parent to them, an adult in their life. Your primary Something I've learned is like your primary focus, support your husband, support the parent in their relationship with their kids. So that's been a whole learning curve. But yeah, another one was also, yeah, all the worry about the ex family in law, or as some people like to call it, the step family in law, because your kids will always, like his kids will always be connected to that other family, and those relatives. And that was an important point to Kris, is that he still maintains those relationships with uncles and aunts and with his parents in law. So that was a little daunting too, like wondering how they would receive me as a new I guess, dynamic in the family, but they were all incredibly welcoming and, had been nothing but gracious and kind. So I'm really grateful for that. I know that's not the case for every blended family, um, but I was very fortunate in that piece that took a lot of weight off my mind. Yeah, your mother-in-law even called me before we got blessed to each other and made it very clear that she was happy for him and welcomed me with open arms, that kind of thing, and just wanted me to take good care of him. So yeah, I'm grateful that I had that very generous support also of the kids extended family and your extended family.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's say those were two of the things. Yeah, I mean, Kris just made it easy. I mean, just him as a person, like, I was so, like, focused on the situation, and then the actual person in front of me I was blown away. So it was a unique, and all the processes I'd been in, all the matching conversations, there were some that had uniquely prepared me to meet him, like his unique situation, and, um, not saying, it's always hard to say no to no to someone when you're in a process, or to say, "Oh, you were a stepping stone to meet my husband." That's tough. I'm sure I was that for some other people, or I don't know. Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't an important part of that. But I am grateful for having my eyes open to many different situations and learning empathy. I think, and kind of dampening down the judgment for whatever was thrown my way. So I think by the time we did connect, about a year after I first reached out, I think we were both in a place where we were ready and humble to receive each other.
Yeah.
Um, like removing a lot of concepts. Like I didn't really care that much that he was much older than me, but as we were getting to know each other, people brought it up like it should be a big deal, but it wasn't. Like, oh, you got that younger girl. Anyway, there were only a couple
Yeah.
of people, but it was like a little bit
I
demeaning.
was a little worried about it. I
Yeah.
think people tend to to frown on guys that marry younger, and so
Like, couldn't find someone your age, huh? Or something. I don't
yeah,
know. Like, yeah.
it didn't matter to me, and I was in process where people both younger and older and the same age as me, um, but I think I was still worried about the optics. I think
Yeah.
maybe it mattered more to me than to her.
Or maybe I mean, I think I had made some, like, for a time, I'd only look at profiles that were exactly this age range and then just not meeting anybody. So I had to break that concept completely. There was a point where I was looking at the international matching website with no filters, which was a huge step for me. Um, Anybody who's been through that, I had a whole matching plan with like only 28 to 33 of this nationality, whatever. I went through all the steps of not being open.
And
Yeah,
are you happy now, Sungmi?
Yes, very much. I wasn't looking for a very handsome, tall, Caucasian European guy. That wasn't on the list of qualities. It was, yeah, faith, family, and community. And
Mm.
we met at the right place, right time.
yeah. Just to be clear, I think I was 39, she was 32 when
Yeah,
she reached out.
yeah.
7-year difference.
Yeah. Thank you, Sungmi, for your response to that. I think this is a fantastic story. So on your end, Sungmi, what has been your growth process to be where you are today?
Yeah, so I was in a relationship. So I was matched when I was 18 and in that relationship for 9 years. Um, Blessed in 2009. I think that relationship ended in 2016 or 2017. Blurry on the dates these days. It's been a while. But yeah, that I experienced that relationship as highly traumatic. I didn't realize it at first. So uh, denial is a funny thing because the symptoms still pop up, but you don't know why they're coming up for you, like anxiety and um, yeah, low self-esteem, all these things. And my process was rerouting myself and family and my faith community. I'd been distant for quite a while. Uh, anyway, yeah, my ex was like drifting into a different way of life, and eventually I chose to end that relationship, which I completely relate with Chris's point of giving up on the idea that the blessing is forever, that it's eternal. That was really hard for me, a very hard point that I took a long time to reconcile with in myself. So I had a lot of anxiety through looking again, and I was like, I'm ready. I'm going to jump right back in. I went to a 24 plus in person. I think our relationship ended in the spring, summer, and then I went in the fall. I mean, not a good idea, guys. I don't recommend that for anybody. But I mean, it got me reconnected. I mean, I think I was looking for, what did I really believe? My faith, my life had been shaken. I had to give up on the future I thought I would have, the children I thought I would have. Um, that was incredibly painful. When I really had to sit with it, I would just burst into tears, and just, I couldn't understand why my ex hadn't chosen me in that life, right? In the end, that he didn't want it. That was a really hard reality that I had to sit with, and come to a place where, like, I have no control over that. And I have no control over what he's doing in his life now, and asking for forgive, like trying to forgive, right? You can't, we have this thing in our church, we say forgive and forget. I don't think you ever forget. You just get further and further away from it with time, but it's still there. Um, but yeah, forgiveness was a really big key that took me a long time. I even prayed in the prayer hall in Champyeong 2 years in a row. I was sent there for work, and let me just say, being single and brokenhearted and being sent to a blessing in Korea was very confronting. Yeah, that again, don't recommend that if you're not in a good place. um, where, yeah, with getting re-blessed and being confronted by aunties, like, why aren't you blessed? Why aren't you with someone? Where's your husband? And you're like, I really don't want to talk to a random stranger about my heartache. And
Of life. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But even overcoming that, like, those aunties who care and uncles who care, about your future, they're a resource. Eventually I came to that point where I was like, oh, anybody? Like, kind of turning it on its face. Like, let's not talk about the sad past. I'm focused on my future. But yeah, I also had a coach I worked with. I talked to her every week at first for, I think, about a year. And then slowly, it was like every couple of weeks, that kind of thing, once a month. But she helped me have like, objective perspective, and reminded me what my goal was.
Mm.
Your goal, you told me your goal was to be happy, like find joy, reduce your anxiety, and like get re-blessed. So whenever I wanted to give up, I had those reminders. And my parents too were incredibly supportive. I remember my dad, he would say, like, you're meant to be ecstatically happy. That's what God wants for you. God wants you to be ecstatically happy. We want you, and I believe 100% it will happen. If you keep moving forward, and if you keep being focused on the right things, right? In a partner. So having people in my life who were affirming, no, you're going in the right direction, when it seemed like I had no more options, or I wasn't finding anybody, and usually those points meant I needed to shift something in myself. It was like a reminder to look at myself, right? What more can I be doing? What more introspection can I do? Who can I reach out to? How can I broaden my network? Um, but yeah, it was a lot. It was, what, 6 years? Yeah, 6 years of healing and reconnecting with what mattered to me. And ultimately, I did choose this community and this faith. And I rooted that in what I understood and feel about God, and that God wants me to have a family. I came to a point where, I think this was said on a different podcast by a different sister. But she said, I would come to some points where I thought, well, God just wants me to be this single missionary. It doesn't want me. Maybe that's not my course. Um, and then having no, I think it's, digging deep and overcoming the despair that comes with that. And then um, still fighting for it. Yeah.
How has your faith in the blessing developed, Sangmi?
Um, Relationships are confronting. And I would say that my faith, I'm still working on it. Again, like day-to-day practices and stuff change, right? The way you root yourself is a little bit different, maybe. And you're focused so much on the couple dynamic. That's something I'm still coming back to, is how do I uniquely connect to God, and in myself. Um, I would say it's deepened in the sense that, especially being around kids, it confronts the parts of yourself maybe that aren't as patient or loving or kind as you thought they were. With yeah, when you're not being confronted with an immediate reaction. Kids have a way of, I think, at least for me, showing me where I need to work on my nature. And asking I ask the question a lot more now: God, what's your perspective? I think that question comes up a lot for me now, because I know if it was just me and just from my own perspective or the way I am right now, it's not always the most gracious, or maybe the bigger picture response to a situation, as it could be.
Did that answer the question you asked? How is your faith in the blessing? Were you asking whether she still believes in the blessing or whether?
Oh, or how it's developed in the
It's,
blessing.
I think you understand where I'm going. Like, it's not common for people to receive the blessing and then end like that and then want to receive the blessing again.
Right.
And so I think there's a process you went through, and all the things that you want in your life, right? A God-centered marriage, all those things can be happen without the blessing
Right.
outside of our faith community. So I guess I have a curiosity as to what
Well, what was it?
is that really spoke to you about the faith and finding someone within the faith and receiving the blessing. Also for you as well, Kris.
Well, I did try dating outside of our movement. I'll say that with the caveat that I still wanted it to be a very
Mm.
intentional process and communication. I tried Christian dating apps, and even went out on a date with a guy, and turned out I was too metaphysical, broad-minded for him. And I found that to be the case with all of the Christian men that I ended up talking to, just chatting with. I was like too much for them ideologically. And yes, because faith and belief in God is such an important point to me and my family. It's what roots us together as a family. Um, yeah, so I wasn't opposed to the idea. My parents, even my dad especially, really encouraged me to date outside our movement, because I was getting older and I wanted a family. And he's like, well, there's just a certain reality there that you gotta acknowledge. If you want kids, you gotta get moving. Um, so that's a harsh reality, I think, for some people. Like, age is a factor at some point. Um, but choosing the blessing for me, um, I think it was more about how we would relate to each other about our faith in God. And it's important for me to be able to talk about it, to be able to talk about my beliefs. And not that that's not possible, right? I have friends outside the church, very good friends. Um, I just felt personally that my faith would deepen within the realm of the blessing rather than conventional marriage.
Mm.
And what we would pass on to our kids, right? That we would both be committed to passing on God's lineage and our understanding of God and faith and family to our children.
Mm.
Yeah, I think from my side, um, you know, I'd add real quick because we both said that we had to get to this place of deciding when to let go of blessing is forever. And it's not that I don't believe the blessing is forever. I do. I think that's the right ideal, right? That's the right goalpost to set. Um, but ideologically, in our church, we can't have it both ways, right? You can't have, um, a spouse who leaves condemn the other person to a life forever, and have, you know, the idea of the three great blessings, right? That we're meant to go a life that fundamentally includes marriage and having children, um, right? Um, and that's really tough because I think some of the realities of divorce in this country that maybe people aren't aware of is that divorce in the US is unilateral. And what that means is that one person can want the divorce and the other person can not want it, and it will happen. It only takes one person to want it. Um, so um, uh, that's tough. Another point I'd make there about my own journey related to that blessing is forever is that I I, I got to a place where I felt like I was, by holding on to being single, I felt like I was throwing away my potential, right? Resigning to a life less fulfilled, right? I was like, okay, I'm just going to be single forever, whatever. Um, but I think ultimately that's not a whole life. It's not a full life. And when you resign to that, you're kind of throwing away the potential that God gave you, right? And ideologically, we have this idea that, for example, suicide is sinful, right? And the basic thinking there is that you're throwing away the precious life that God gave you, right? And so if you're resigned to living alone, right, because your spouse has left you, um, you know, then are you throwing away your life, in that situation? That's tough. That's tough. Um, and and I think that's relevant to not just the blessing, but to the idea of marriage. And I like that we have this idea of the blessing, um, being forever, not just in this world, but also the next. Um,
It takes some pressure off, to be honest. I mean, just to lighten it a little bit. But it's like, well, I mean, we have this ideology, right? That we grow the most when you're on Earth. But then I like to think that you keep growing in your relationship. If it's for eternity, I mean, that's a long time to
yeah,
be with someone and work out a few minor kinks
yeah,
here and there.
yeah.
Yeah.
As far as faith in the blessing goes, like I definitely do believe in the ideal of the blessing. I mean, I've chose I've chosen it, 3 times now. It's the third time I've gotten blessed, and and um, and I love the community I grew up in. I think some people, a lot of my peers my age, are kind of look back on their childhood in the church, growing up in the church, and have left, and I'm sort of angry. And I don't understand that at all because we grew up in a safe environment. Our peers were awesome peers. I would imagine the vast majority of us never experienced like parents with um, addiction or sexual abuse. Like it was a nice environment to grow up in. I think some people experienced some level of shame within the community, because we set our ideals crazy high in the church. And I think that was tough for people that couldn't live up to those ideals, which I think is most of us. Um, but that doesn't discount what we had. Um, and so I I think the appeal of wanting to get blessed to someone within this community speaks for itself. There's a lot of really great people in this community. And in fact, that is one of the things I was confronted with, when I had to decide, do I want the blessing again? Is, if you just the idea of getting, finding someone outside the church, like, how do you know who you're going to get married or blessed to, if you find someone outside the church? Like, it's a mixed bag. Like, it's not to say that everyone in the church is better or great or perfect in any kind of way, but at least we have the same ideals, right? We have the same kind of expectations of openness. Um, and there's not, you don't necessarily have that if you're looking for someone outside of the church. You may get married to someone that is never open with you. Um, and that can happen in church too, but at least we have that basic premise, right? We're open with each other.
So what are you guys looking forward to? Thanks, by the way. Thanks for sharing, both of you. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to?
Having a family together.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's our biggest hope and goal and
It's our next life goal.
next life goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's having kids together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything else is details now.
Mhm.
And I'm looking forward to being able to grow old with someone again. I lost that. I thought I was going to grow up alone until I decided to move on. And that's a big deal, when you commit to growing up alone or growing old alone. I don't think anyone wants that.
Yeah.
So that's something to look forward to, growing old with someone.
Mhm.
Well, before you guys grow too old and die into your eternal life, you have any advice or final words for listeners?
Stay open. You never know where God's leading you, and it might be in the exact place where you were too afraid to look, in that little corner over there of prospects that you weren't considering. Yeah. So trust your intuition, but also have a team of people, have people you trust to be honest with you, about you, not about the other person you're considering. Yeah.
I'd second that. Be open-minded. I'd maybe phrase it, I'd maybe go further and say be radically open-minded. I think be more open-minded than the secular world expects of people looking for someone. If someone reaches out, say yes, you know. Don't be like, well, I'm not sure about how this person looks, or
Their height.
height, or too Asian or not Asian enough, or it's like, seriously, just say yes
Those
and
are
have a
things that
discussion.
I have had discussions with people about. So
Yeah. I mean, it's a big deal, it's like, you never know who someone is until you've spoken to them. So this whole idea of like saying no to someone just based on
even based on a profile.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we volunteer with the 24 plus connect retreats. And it's a huge eye opener from the other side. Also, it was very confronting now being on staff. I'm like, oh my God, I was that person who laser focused on one person during a retreat and then was disappointed. Um, but yeah, one big thing we emphasize is openness, but and that takes a lot of courage and vulnerability. And that's why you need a support team. You need people to like bolster you up. No, you're great. You got this. Like, why is it confronting? Talk to me, like, and having those people who aren't scared of hard conversations, I think that's ultimately one of the big reasons why we chose each other is he was vulnerable with me. I would say a lot more upfront. I'll admit that. I was very guarded. And that gave me confidence to be vulnerable back, right? And talk about some really hard realities of like, anyway, I won't go into all the questions we asked each other, but there were some really tough questions that made me like put my guard up and like, is he really? This is hard. Is this supposed to be this? This kind of hard question. But then when you overcome that with each other, like that's what a relationship is.
Yeah.
You have to be real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Find someone you can trust.
Yeah.
I was laughing because I was having a conversation with a sister. You'd appreciate this, Sungmi. And she was having a hard time finding someone. And I asked
Mm,
her, like, what is your primary, like, what's the filter you're putting on that's
yeah.
making it hard? And she said she's looking for someone that's taller, right?
Mm.
And I was like, okay, apparently this is a real thing for women. Apparently.
It was for me. I will
Okay,
admit
there
that
you
that
go.
was a thing
That's
that I had to overcome and talk to a shorter guy. It was a very uncomfortable conversation for him.
that's that's why I'm bringing this up. Okay, so I asked her how tall, right? And she said something like 5'4" or 5'5" or something, right? And I was like, honey, do you realize that most men in our church are Japanese and Southeast Asian?
It's true.
She was like, oh shoot, you're right. Like you're like halving your population,
Yeah,
right?
I realized that too, and it's something I had to overcome, and um I considered short, and I realized what I was actually asking for was a strong embrace. Like I had this vision of being like safe and held, and it actually didn't have to do with height. It had to do with confidence. So I talked to shorter guys who were like super confident in themselves, and it was very attractive. Yeah, so give hope out there.
That's
But
interesting.
that's why I want to preface, he's 6'4"
Yeah.
and much taller than me, but I wasn't looking for that. It wasn't a prerequisite.
Yeah, I've noticed that short guys they have to make up with tall confidence.
Hmm.
I've noticed that. It's like, yeah.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah.
anything else you guys want to end with?
You're meant to be ecstatically happy. I'm going to repeat my dad's words. Like I do believe that. It's cliche, when we're all despairing in the process, we're like, there's no one out there for me. And then you find that person, you're like, you're meant to have this
Mm.
happiness. I know it's cliche to say, but you are meant to be ecstatically happy. That's God's hope for you. It might not look the way you think, though. I'd say like God's vision for my life was so far beyond my piddly little expectation of my marriage and my life, and that doesn't mean that it doesn't come with hard work. It does. You do have to put in the effort to reach that vision, right, that God sees for you and tries to lead you toward. But I mean, like when we were getting to know each other, I felt like the universe was jumping with joy, and I don't say that lightly. I'm not a super spiritual person who like, but it was, I mean, just fun, like dolphins jumping out of the water. I mean, no joke, that actually happened to us. And then I'd never seen a dolphin in that bay.
Mm.
So I think God was jumping with joy, and wanted to encourage us because he knew it would be hard. But yeah, I think that's always the expectation. Yeah.
So I mean, if at the lowest point in your blessing journey, if God came to you and said, Sungmi or Kris, I promise you, you will be happier and more fulfilled than you could ever imagine. But it will not be easy and will not be a straight line. It'll be up and down and it'll be winding road. How comforted would you feel by those words?
I would have said, yeah, right.
Yeah, I was like
At the lowest point.
incredulous. Yeah. It's like,
Right.
oh God, come on.
But how would
It
your
would have been tough to receive that at the
Yeah.
lowest point. You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, why does it have to be hard? That would have been my question.
yeah, that would have been your response?
Yeah.
Well, if you could go
Said
back,
this.
let's say if you could go back in time and talk to yourself at
Mm,
that
Yeah.
point, what would you want to say?
I would have said, I mean, when I was ready, find the time when you're ready, right? Some people are going to be ready, some people not. And when you're ready, just put in the hard work, you know. Just start making the steps, moving in the right direction. It takes time and it takes consistent effort.
yeah, keep up the momentum.
Yeah.
You're doing keep going, right? Keep the vision. Don't lose your integrity doing it. Keep that high goal, that high vision, of what you're looking for and what you value. Yeah, just keep up the momentum and surround yourself with positive, happy people. I mean, that's maybe like when you're feeling really low and down, like it's really helpful to have people who love you, respect you, who see your potential, right? Remind you of that in your lowest point. But yeah, I would just say keep up the momentum. You will get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd also add, because it's a tough place to be in, right? And I mean, I'd say when you get that lead, because in our church you're gonna get a lead, right? There's always gonna be some aunt or uncle figure like, hey, I know this guy, maybe you should talk to that person. When you get that lead, jump on it, and then you've started your journey. It's as simple as that.
So tying into that, so actually the first person who suggested Kris to me was a good friend who was in a process with him, and she said no. So when she suggested a guy she said no to, and I think she's wonderful and all these great things, and I was like, oh, well, why would I want him? Like that was my immediate like, I don't want your like, whatever. I don't know what the word is. your
Reject.
your reject, which was a really immature thought and like reaction, looking back. But she said all these nice qualities about him, and I was like, yeah, but you didn't pick him, and you're wonderful. So but it wasn't the right fit. So also don't dismiss those recommendations. I also made that recommendation to a friend. She ended up rejecting the guy. They didn't get together, but like she didn't even give him a chance because it was like, well, I don't want your rejects. So that's a concept to overcome. Yeah.
Well, you guys heard it here. There is an hour's worth of fantastic jam-packed wisdom. And I want to emphasize to everyone, please consider sharing this episode with your team, the people that you love, the people on your side of the court, and especially with people that are going through some low times in their lives, people that are questioning their beliefs in the blessing or questioning the beliefs in themselves, or that God is even with them at all. And I think we all experience that at some points in our lives. And if anything, this episode will be extremely helpful to people who need to take action, right? And who need to have courage to move forward with their lives and take action towards what they really genuinely want in their lives and never give up hope. So thanks everyone for listening. Please consider joining the MatchNet podcast. The MatchNet program. Please consider joining the MatchNet program at matchnet.us if you want a step-by-step process to getting started and taking action through the matching process. Thank you, Sungmi and Kris, for your time and your wisdom. Please give them all some loving messages. Reach out to them if you have questions, and we'll see you guys next episode. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Benji. Love you guys.